I'll call the meeting, the Board and Zone Appeals to order. First of all, roll call, Celeste. Yes. Uh, Eric can't be here, so y'all stuck with me tonight. Seth. Here. Ron. Here. Kendra. And of course, Rosalie and Amber and Amanda Harrington is here. In your minutes, you'll have a copy of the minutes. I'll give you a few, some time to look over it.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Minutes were approved and second. Next thing is there all in favor? Any opposed? Next is we got the agenda here. Is there any changes that need to be made? Motion to accept the agenda by Mr. Moreland.
I'll second.
Second by Kendra. All in favor? Aye. So the agenda is set. Public hearing, anybody from the public? Any old business? Then we'll get to new business, the training PUD 101.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. So tonight's training is on your Hartsville-Trousdale County Planned Unit Development District regulations that went into effect March of 2026. Tonight is intended to just be a very brief overview, not really digging into any one type or another, but just kind of giving you all an idea of what you can expect in your administrative process if a PUD ever makes it to the Board of Zoning Appeals. But again, this training is oriented for BZA, Planning Commission, and your county commissioners who may or may not be here in the audience this evening. So as we go along, of course, as with any other trainings, please interrupt, raise your hand, say, hey, I don't understand this. Hey, can you slow down? But again, we're just going to have just kind of an overview of planned unit development. So I believe you've got the PowerPoint in your packet. We had numbers on the slides this time, yay for me. So hopefully it won't be so hard to follow along. My apologies for the training last time and that hardship there. So the very first slide is the stated purpose of planned unit developments. These regulations promote flexible and efficient land use by allowing diversified, well-planned placement of structures and circulation systems. They aim to preserve existing landscape features, encourage comprehensive site planning, and provide for shared ownership and maintenance of common areas, utilities, and streets. In Trousdale County, two types of planned unit development districts are permitted: residential and commercial mixed use. On your next slide, general provisions required for each type. So regardless if you're going for a mixed use or residential, these general provisions are required for each type of PUD, a planned unit development. I'm going to be saying PUD for short. A PUD requires submission of a master plan for zoning consideration. The property must be under single ownership or controlled by an eligible entity such as a governmental agency or redeveloper, and division or transfer of sections must comply with the approved master plan and subdivision regulations. Due to the unique nature of each PUD, Modification of standard subdivision specifications may be allowed if approved as part of a master plan. Construction must begin within a year of approval, and projects may be developed in stages to ensure logical and balanced growth. Common open spaces and facilities must be appropriately designed, improved, and maintained for their intended use, with provisions for permanent ownership and upkeep by an established homeowners association or other responsible organization. Failure of such organization to maintain common areas may result in the county or another agency assuming maintenance cost, which can be assessed to property owners. The Planning Commission may also require land to be set aside or dedicated for public use, such as streets, parks, or schools. Okay, your next slide. On your administrative procedure, you see several steps. You've got preliminary approval, zoning amendment, application for final approval of stages, final master plan, I'll get it out here one of these days, final master development plan, amendments to the PUD, subdivision plat required, building reconstruction, and zoning considerations. So all PUDs must follow a defined approval process. Preliminary approval requires submission of a master plan detailing the project's location, layout, uses, population density, infrastructure, public reservations, and staging schedule, along with ownership documents, covenants, and proposed easements. Once the Planning Commission grants preliminary approval, it recommends a zoning amendment to the County Commission. After rezoning, the applicant must apply for final approval within 1 year, ensuring the final master plan aligns substantially with the preliminary plan and includes detailed drawings, utility layouts, landscape plans, and legal documents for common areas. Large developments may proceed in approved stages. Any amendments to the plan must preserve the original intent and be approved by the Planning Commission. A final subdivision plat is required when PUD land will be sold, showing accurate boundaries and, for multi-level units, vertical references. Damaged or destroyed buildings may be reconstructed only in full compliance with the master plan. The Planning Commission must also ensure that the proposed PUD is compatible with surrounding development, supported by adequate streets and utilities, and designed to prevent congestion while maintaining a harmonious relationship with neighboring areas.
This PUD it goes anywhere out in this, but what kind of consideration do you get as a surrounding area?
Excellent question. So you would be looking at issues of density. So if you've got an R1 area that's low density and you've got an R3 PUD trying to locate right in the middle of it, that's a mismatch of densities. So that's one thing you would take into consideration. If you've got an R1 PUD that wants to come in, and we'll get into a little bit of the differences here in a minute, but let's say an R1 PUD has a little bit of commercial use mixed into it, but it's predominantly residential use. You would want your architecture and your style of PUD to come in and match your surrounding areas. So you wouldn't want, you know, I'm not an architect, but you wouldn't want a bunch of, you know, Cape Cods going into an area that's primarily English Tudor, you know? I mean, you would want similar architectural styles and considerations. Yes, sir. Sure. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I had actually moved this particular slide. 2 types of PUDs are allowed. I want you to dog ear it because we're going to come back to it. Let me make sure where I am here. Oh, no, never mind. So 2 types of PUDs are allowed. So we talked about residential and commercial mixed use. We've got residential planned unit developments. Is that the slide that you all are on? Okay. So we've got residential planned unit developments. So you've got within those specific residential PUDs are allowed the following uses: residential activities, community facility activities, And commercial activities, 100 acre, if the PUD is 100 acres or larger, not to exceed 5% of the total acreage of the planned unit development. So that's what I was saying, that you could have a residential PUD that has a commercial element to it, as long as the PUD is 100 acres in size and the commercial element is no more than 5% of the total acreage of the property.
Quick question.
Yes.
What establishes this restriction? Is this to the Hartsville, Trousdale County? code?
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes.
didn't know if it was like a Tennessee statewide or if
No.
this is just what we elected to do.
No,
Okay.
this is all in your, based off your ordinance that was adopted March 2026.
Okay.
Yep. Mhm. So on your next slide, residential PUD dimensional requirements. An approved residential planned unit development may include single-family, duplex, and multifamily dwellings, as well as community facilities such as assembly, cultural, recreational, and essential service structures. In developments of 100 acres or more, up to 5% of the total area may be used for convenience commercial activities designed to serve residents, provided buildings are compatible in design, trash and loading areas are screened, and signage is limited and non-illuminated. Our PUDs must be at least 2 acres in size with 30-foot front and peripheral setbacks, and detached dwelling lots of at least 8,000 square feet with 75 feet of frontage. No building may exceed 3 stories or 35 feet in height, and maximum residential density is 4.35 units per acre for single family and 12 units per acre for multifamily or mixed types. Streets may be public or private, but must be built to subdivision standards with adequate pavement width and turnarounds. Off-street parking with at least 2 spaces per dwelling unit is required with paved, marked, and landscaped surfaces. Developments must have approved sewer and water systems capable of providing 500 gallons per minute at 20 PSI, and fire hydrants must be spaced no more than 500 feet apart. Waste facilities must be enclosed, and at least 15% of the gross acreage must be set aside as permanent open space or recreational area, which may include facilities such as community buildings, pools, and playgrounds. Any questions on residential PUDs? Again, I'm just hitting the highlights here. Okay. So your next slide is commercial mixed-use planned unit developments. Within commercial mixed-use PUDs, you're allowed to have residential activities, commercial activities, and community facility activities. So a commercial mixed-use PUD may include residential uses such as single-family, duplex, and multifamily dwellings, as well as a wide range of commercial uses, including retail, offices, food services, entertainment, medical facilities, and transient lodging, along with essential community services. Each CMU PUD must cover at least 2 acres with a 40-foot front setback, a 10-foot landscape front yard, and a 40-foot peripheral building setback. Side and rear yards must also be at least 10 feet and landscaped. No building may exceed 3 stories or 35 feet in height, and residential density may not exceed 4.35 units per acre for single-family dwellings or 12 units per acre for multifamily or mixed developments. The total building coverage cannot exceed 40% of the site. Streets may be public or private, meeting subdivision standards and required pavement widths. Adequate turnarounds are required for dead-end streets. Off-street parking and loading must comply with county standards and be paved, marked, and landscaped. Developments must provide approved sewer and water systems, and fire hydrants must be located within 500 feet of all buildings with sufficient pressure and flow. Waste containers must be enclosed and screened. Signage must comply with ordinances, and at least 10% of the site must be landscaped and buffered where adjacent to residential or agricultural areas. The Planning Commission may adjust yard, buffering, or improvement standards for these type of PUDs with limited or non-public uses, provided safety, access, and health protections remain adequate. Does anybody have any questions so far on that very brief overview? Okay, So how is a PUD different than a regular site plan? How do we think from the very brief discussion that we just had over administrative procedures and what you could expect from a master plan and everything? How does that seem different than a regular site plan that you all have seen? It's a coordination of multiple,
Well, she just repeated it.
right? But coordination of multiple,
A coordination of multiple established buildings and areas like the recreational and commercial areas, and a rule of thumb amongst them.
right?
Okay.
Right, exactly. So you have a more coordinated effort for more moving parts, basically. So whereas a regular site plan, a traditional site plan has one focus. You've got a building being built and you've got one set of regulations, your underlying zone from your book, from your zoning book that you would look at for your setbacks and your lot coverages and all of the things, but your focus is just on one thing. With a PUD, as Cicely was saying, there's lots of moving parts to it. You could have a common open space area that's been improved with gazebos and walking trails. You could have multiplexes. You could have quadruplexes in with duplexes and with single family homes all in one development. You could have that same development have a couple of retail fronts as long as, it's not to exceed, 2 acres and not to exceed 5% of the total acreage of the project. So what happens is this master plan that I was referring to is what's submitted by the applicant. And that master plan is almost like its own zoning ordinance or zoning or a pattern book. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to as a pattern book for the project. And in that master plan, the applicant has to tell Hartsville Trousdale what it is exactly they want to do, where things are going to be laid out, who's going to be responsible for the ownership and maintenance of those common areas that we talked about, because sometimes, like I said, sometimes they'll be improved. Sometimes if you work with TDEC, they can remain in a natural state if there's some kind of habitat, a snail darter or something to that effect, maybe hiding out in there. But there's all sorts of different, sidewalks need to be taken into consideration. Who's going to maintain sidewalks? I said in here a couple of times that roads, even they can be public or private, but they have to be constructed to public standard. So why is that? For
uniformity,
uniformity? And why else? Why else could we think?
safety.
Longevity, safety? What if a developer goes belly up in the middle of a project? We need those roads to be built to a standard where the county can come in and call a bond. Now, you all weren't here for the planning commission discussion of bond gate 2026. But we had a situation of a bond come up needing to be posted for a final plat, and that's exactly why. Because if something falls through and there's a street that's called for to be built, the county or the metro government has to have a way to be able to call that bond and be able to pick up and go in and complete those streets. Well, if those streets were not constructed to public standard, that bond's not going to take you very far, is it? No, it won't. Usually it would be, unless you all come to a third party inspector agreement, but generally I would think that it would be.
So the roads department does have their own engineering. They do a third party that comes out and inspects the roads to make sure that they meet their standards.
There we go. Yep. So, yes, that would be part of it too. So with the site plan, generally because you have a one focus, focus on one, you might have a building that has 3 or 4 tenants, but there are centralized mailbox units that are required by the postmaster. It is not a local call. It is a call made by the postmaster. Whether or not you have those multi-box units, usually, you need to, and I can't remember if we have a specific call out in our book for CBUs in the subregs. Okay. But usually you will have, 1 or 2 parking spots that are required to be associated with that, enough queuing space for the mail truck and people coming in and being able to pass and things like that. But that would certainly be required these days for a planned unit development of either type.
You did,
Yes, yes. So subregs are the basis. But one of the things about PUDs is that, well, let me back up. So who can grant variances in the subdivision regulations? Yeah, it's not BZA. No, it's Planning Commission. Planning Commission grants variances for subdivision regulations. So when the applicant is going through its process, it needs to call out any type of variance that they're wanting from the subdivision regulations. And that is what makes it into into the master plan. That's why I was saying that master plan almost can function like it's specific pattern book for a planned unit development, because that master plan will encapsulate any variances that are granted to a project, because there are multiple parts. So for example, if you've got a residential PUD that has, let's say 1% commercial, and let's say that 1% commercial part needed to have a variance of some sort, maybe on a slope of a road. But it didn't apply to anything else. That would need to be encapsulated in that master plan, because that master plan is what shows where everything is going, what documentation goes along with it, the final site plan, subdivision plats that need to be recorded at the time of approval, all of this sort of thing. It's important to remember also that PUDs don't get done in a month. Okay, anybody who comes in here and wants a PUD done as a month is smoking something, and I want some of it. Okay, and in fact, in some of my communities where PUDs happen quite often, we have it on the submittal calendar that people need to budget 6 months to a year to get through the PUD process. It's extensive. And there's a reason for that, because you've got a lot of you've got a lot of moving parts, you've got a lot of documents that you need to go through. And a lot of times on the applicant's part, you've got ownership issues. You've got, to make sure that everybody is under one. Your HOA needs to be created early, so that you can get those draft restrictive covenants in early with the submittal, so that the local government can ensure that we're not the ones left holding the bag on common, recreational areas, sidewalks, roads, whatever else may be coming up. The earlier that we can get a hold of these things, the better. And so I know a lot of times people kind of roll their eyes and, at CCNRs, the restrictive covenants and codes and restrictions, and go, oh, we'll deal with that later. No. For our purposes, we need to deal with it now. We need to deal with it in the very, very beginning. Yes, it can be a little costly to the applicant, because they've got to get attorneys involved probably earlier than they had really liked to. But that's the name of the game. Questions?
you did say that the residential PUDs have a certain percentage of it allocated for community aspects, sidewalks or whatever. Did I-
For commercial aspects.
Only commercial, so there's nothing inside of these that makes it where if you're a certain size or above, you have to have a certain percentage designated for common.
I don't believe that there is a minimum open space in the book. That doesn't mean that your planning commission can't come back and say, we feel like there's too much density or there's too much of this. We want you to back off of it a little bit. There are density requirements, but there's no written open space requirement that I could locate.
And then you took in the buffer strips, you could actually calculate the percentage of the project, and it does state, it states in various different places.
Okay,
We've not writing that was a solid.
right,
Because it was already not back.
right, okay. And generally, you know, sidewalks, it just depends on communities. Some communities consider sidewalk open space, some people don't. I'm in the camp where I don't consider sidewalks open space, but it's neither here nor there. That's what the commissioner said is true. You can kind of back it out that way.
So there's another question that may not be for here, but the verbiage on the spacing of the fire hydrants,
Mm-hmm.
it's 500 feet
Mhm.
between two, or, you know, no more than 500 feet between each one. And then on the residential side, it's each building must be within 500 feet. How is that verbiage, or why is that verbiage different?
That I can't answer. I'll defer to Rosalie on that.
So as far as fire code, depending on the use and how it is addressed for residential use, in fact, that's in our definitions of our zoning ordinances. Well, what is fire protection? And when we look at site plans, we need to see a fire hydrant within 500 feet of a piece of property. And that deals with like residential buildings because of their insurances and things of that nature. And fire protection means, just like it states here in the PUD, 500 gallons per minute and at 20 PSI. So that's the distance, and it's regulated in the fire code. Absolutely. And in fact, too, in the PUD regulations here, the residential and the commercial, it also talks about you need to follow the fire code for the distance between the buildings in order to prevent, you know, like crossover for fires. Excellent point.
So it's important to remember that no matter what you're looking at, whether it's a site plan or a PUD or anything, your building codes and all of that always still apply. That's just an extra layer. So that's a very well taken point.
I'd like to point out too, in the PUD regulations, the planning commission, when it first comes to them, can basically massage, if you will, what landscaping features need to happen there. When we were talking about variances and the master plan, they can say, well, this is the definition of the buffer strip that we need to see. Whereas before, when you were looking at site plans, if you had a commercial site plan coming forward and it has like agricultural next door, we had to have the 10-foot buffer strip. That's the, you know, and it's defined in a specific way. You need to have a 7-foot fence. You need to have this many trees, this much bushes and things of that nature. This is going to give the planning commission the authority to kind of say, well, this type of, you know, master plan needs to have maybe a 20-foot buffer strip, and they have the authority to do that.
So that's really all I had for the training. If anybody's got any other questions, I'm happy to take those, or if there's something that anybody wants me to delve into a little bit deeper, I am more than willing to do that as well.
Do you have an example how this would come to the BZA of a situation?
Generally.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can think of that would need to come to the BZA is if there was a variance on a setback of some sort that they would need, and they was then at that point that they would need to be able to prove their hardship. Have it be topographically related. None of those criteria change. And I don't know that you were here for some of our earlier training. But we can get you copies of that. But there are 9 standards that the state of Tennessee lay out for criteria for approval of a variance. And it can't be man-made, that sort of thing. So that would be an example of how something would get to you all. Just any kind of relief from the zoning ordinance itself.
So question for you to kind of piggyback off of what Seth was asking. Say, for instance, the master plan was approved and they were stated that they had to have this, that, and the other thing. And perhaps they weren't very happy with that and they wanted to challenge that. Could they take that to the Board of Zoning Appeals? I mean, they are a quasi judicial type of.
If the applicant wasn't happy about it?
Mhm.
Oh.
Would they be able to bring it to the Board of Zoning Appeals and say, I think this was unfounded? Okay,
No.
there we go.
That would go to Chancery.
Let's come back. Planning, it did come to BCA, all changes, all the things they were told, it's all locked in here to plan. And the commission says, no, we don't like it. They don't have to accept it, they don't have to rezone. It is a rezone, whether it's the R PUD and the C PUD, it is just another type of rezone. And for the most part, the county commission is not obligated to rezone each property. Now, talking with Rick Gregory as we were developing this, there is a reasonable understanding as a landowner goes through the expense that this will be as presented if it meets all the qualifications that it would be approved. And if it does meet all the qualifications and the commission decides not to do it, they have to have a really good reason for not doing it.
Would they go through the rezoning first?
Well, that's, Yeah.
Whole planning,
Yeah.
oh, so it's different from,
It is. Okay. Kind of combines everything into one.
yeah, that's what I'm still in the old, but
Well, in doing it this way, when it comes to the commission, they have a complete project, this is what's going to happen. So it's not an open zoning situation, you know exactly how to do it. Whereas currently, we have to just think of the worst case scenario every time.
that's better, because now, I say I'm gonna do something for all 3, but I'm gonna do this. I can change my mind once it's rezoned, as long as it's in all 3.
right.
So this, you've got the whole thing at one time to do it. That's good.
You did say it's a slow process.
It is a slow process because it requires a lot of energy and a lot of time and expense up front, which kind of ferrets out the people who aren't very serious. So if they're willing to go through the PUD process, then they're willing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mainly residential. Mm-hmm.
Shopping mall or something?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there would be some aspect of residential in there as well. Some mixed use in there. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah,
So we don't have a straight commercial. We have a mix.
it's commercial mixed use.
Okay.
Right, and The commercial mixed-use PUDs encourage a balanced mix of living, working, and service uses within one coordinated development. So it's not just straight commercial. That can be accomplished with site plan. A regular site plan without going into a PUD.
So we could have essentially a commercial PUD, but it would be all achieved within a simple site plan and not within.
No,
Okay.
you wouldn't have a PUD. It would just be a commercial site plan.
So there would be a scenario, or there could be a scenario where someone would have a plan for multiple commercial aspects in one developed area, but it wouldn't have to go through this because it wouldn't qualify.
Right, it would just go through the site plan process.
Is that by design for us to allow it more freely, or is that to show that, do we not have those guidelines established because we don't want one of those in Hartsville? Or is it because we don't have the restrictions? We don't want restrictions on how that would be developed? Like, I guess what I'm saying is like, is it set up this way so that we can control how the residential and mixed areas are done, but then when it comes to commercial, it's just however they want to do it because we're trying to promote it to be done as a commercial?
There's more restrictions based on the commercial because of the different uses of what the commercial is. I mean, just like, say you've got a single family residence, well, that's what that is. If you've got a commercial use, when you start looking at building codes and fire codes, it's looking, okay, what is the use of that building? What is that commercial use? How is that affected? What type of infrastructure is that going to need? Things of that nature. That's going to need to be all incorporated in that master plan to see, first of all, do we really have the infrastructure to support that? Do they have the appropriate land area? If you go back and look at the slide, you have to have so much space, open space dedicated so that you're not covering all the lots.
But that's kind of what I was asking though, is like, I didn't hear anything about a commercial PUD.
Right,
Like-
there's not a pure commercial PUD.
Right, and that's because there's already inside the commercial requirements, there's already so much that overlaps how it would be integrated into existing and neighboring commercial properties.
That's an intent question that I can't answer. I wasn't here for the writing of the resolution. Okay.
Also able to have that as an option for industrial groups so that it can be seen as one of the zones. The commercial, we didn't do a specific commercial, but like you said, you already have commercial built into the R PUD, and then the commercial residential, you have it here also. You don't have to have a certain amount of residential. You can have the whole thing commercial if you want, but it gives you the option to still have residential. The idea was that you might want to have apartment complex or townhome around with your commercial business, kind of feeding customers right. That makes sense. So the prison side, would that kind of be an example? It would be kind of, they didn't do it, that close in there small. Yeah, it could be that again, that would be an example where what you do. If they have all regulations, on one side of it.
So if I could draw your attention to slide number 6, where it does reference the residential plan unit development. The very third one says commercial activities, 100 acres or larger. It does say community facility activities. So there is some more structure in there. You're going to find some more definition and meat on the bones here in the combined ordinances. Amber, if we could go ahead and send that out to everybody, let's go ahead and separate out the residential PUD and the mixed use PUD and send it out to the BZA and the Planning Commission so that they can look at that and see. It really kind of gives a lot more definition on streets, the HOAs, and what is going to be allowed, what is the space that's dedicated to different things, and that's going to help you understand. Yes, sir. I've had several individuals come into the office and speak about PUDs. Nothing definitive yet. I think they're just kind of looking at it and considering.
Any other questions? I don't have any reports. What about you?
Thank you guys for bearing with us. I know last month we didn't have a BZA meeting. We didn't have a training last month. There was the month where we had the Tennessee Building Official Association Conference in East Tennessee. There was a lot of great discussions on 2024 codes, more about fire codes as well. April was a very interesting month because not only did we have the conference, but we had multiple, well, let's just say people coming and visiting our lovely jurisdiction. We had every 3 years, the State Fire Marshal's Office does an audit of all the jurisdictions, the exempt jurisdictions. More often than not, the audit consists of filling out a large packet of forms. Okay, how do you do and enforce building codes? What does the process look like if somebody, wants to, that doesn't like the answer to the question, can I do this? What does that process look like? And so we had to detail everything out where we have a Board of Zoning Appeals. They hear all the different variances. They are a quasi judicial committee that can make these decisions, say they didn't like what the building official says. You guys would be able to evaluate that and make a decision. So not only did we have to fill out all this packet on what codes we're on, how the process works, we also had an on-site audit from the director of the residential building inspectors come to the office, inspect what we're doing, look at how we do our building permits, and they also did on-site inspections with me. So it was very entertaining, shall we say, but we did pass. They said that we are doing a very good program. We have a very strong program in our community, and we are enforcing the codes very well. We also had another on-site visit every 2 years. It seemed like all the stars aligned in the month of April. They visit the jurisdiction every 2 years, and they inspect 2 different departments to the Tennessee OSHA to see whether or not we're following safety codes. And so right after the State Fire Marshal's Office, TOSHA came the very next week. So that was very nice, very pleasant to see the individual. And we did go to the EMS department as well as Public Works Department, and we looked at how they were enforcing the OSHA standards there. And of course, there's always room for improvement everywhere, right? It's all in how you look at it. And it's an opportunity to be more safe and make sure that, the hazardous communication protocol is there, bloodborne pathogen information is there, safety data sheets is available for everyone. And so, again, April was very interesting, and I am so glad we're in May. So looking at the various trainings that we're going to do, I know I requested Amanda to do the PUD training because there are 2 new zones. And as Mr. Kerr had asked, has anybody been interested in even pursuing doing a PUD? Yes. So you will be seeing this. And so we're trying to provide that education for everybody because the Planning Commission, of course, is very familiar with site plans. You guys have also looked at site plans because they may need a variance on something. The County Commission, this is going to be an opportunity for them to also start getting familiar with, well, how do you evaluate this when somebody wants to do a PUD rezoning? what are we looking at here exactly? And being able to have, educated opinions on, okay, does this follow our code? Is this something that we want here? So any other suggestions, if you guys wouldn't mind emailing us other things that you would like to learn about, and seeing what we have, so we can provide the training that we need for the 4 hours per year. And that's all I have. Thank you.
You got anything? Well, any, the chair, board, got anything? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion to adjourn, second.
Seconded.
Thank y'all all for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.